You are listening to New Theory Radio. Theory Radio.
Hello and welcome to another edition of New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk, Saga 960 AM. My name is Nav Nanwa, I am your host, and this is the show where we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. Thank you so much for joining me on this beautiful Sunday. I hope all of you are continuing to practice social distancing despite the beautiful weather. We need to still stay indoors. We need to still stay inside as it's overly important. The numbers are looking good, but we want to keep this going. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So I urge you to continue practicing social distancing, especially when you're listening to New Theory Radio. And we have a very jam-packed episode lined up for you this week. I'm actually going to be joined by an individual who is considered quite the mainstay here within the Mississauga community. He is not only a longtime radio host, actually, funny story, my first time being in a radio station was because I was with a buddy of mine who was getting interviewed on this guy's radio show back in 2009. He is not only a prominent DJ here within the community, he's also the official DJ of the Raptors 905. And if you know that the Raptors 905 games are aired here on Saga 960 AM. And he has a new project out called Toronto versus the 90s. And it is my homie DJ Andre 905 that will be joining us here on this week's edition of NTR. Andre stops by to not only talk about the project Toronto vs. the 90s, but they actually dropped their first single this week called Forward, and it featured Stay Out Late. Shouts to Stay Out Late. If you're familiar with New Theory Radio, you know that we've had many members of the Stay Out Late crew here on the show. So shout outs to Scotty, shout outs to Trey, shout outs to Jay, shout outs to Casino Costa, shout outs to Charlie Noir, and shout outs to Irks. And it is a good old-fashioned hip-hop posse track. I love it. It's been getting a lot of praise across the board when you think about Complex and some of these other big-time blogs. Actually, SixBuzz premiered the video, which is totally insane. And it's a fascinating conversation with Andre. We not only talk about his project, not only talk about the new song, we theorize a little bit about the importance of paying homage to history and why that needs to keep going. And Andre really dives deep into that when he explains the album that's coming out on May 11th, so you will not want to miss this conversation. And then we are going to continue our look at The Last Dance, which is a documentary series profiling Michael Jordan and the 97-98 Chicago Bulls as they head into what would be their 6th championship. A very fascinating documentary. I'm still very much enjoying it, especially the episodes from this past week, episodes 3 and 4. And due to the topics that were addressed in episodes 3 and 4, I thought it was only right to bring on someone who is a true champion of Canadian basketball. He is one of the masterminds behind North Pole Hoops, which is an organization focused on developing talent here locally in Canada. He's also a play-by-play commentator for the Raptors 905 here on Saga 960 AM, so I'm sure you've heard his voice before with Matt Cullen, and he's also a play-by-play analyst for the CEBL, and we're super excited to have him here on New Theory Radio. It is Jason Thom. He is going to be joining me to break down episodes 3 and 4. We talk about where we were during this time in our lives. We really dissect the character of Dennis Rodman. We talk a lot about Phil Jackson, and what's actually fascinating about Phil and our conversation there is that Jason actually provides a perspective or an opinion on who he thinks currently within the NBA is the most like Phil Jackson. And I feel like the answer might not surprise you because it might be someone that's based here locally. So it's a fantastic conversation with Jason. I love breaking down The Last Dance. It is truly amazing viewing during this quarantine. And I hope you are really enjoying these segments because this one is definitely a good one. All that and more on this week's edition of New Theory Radio, but we are going to take a quick commercial break here on News Talk Saga 960 AM, and then when we come back, we are going to be joined by DJ Andre 905, the official DJ of the Raptors 905, and we are going to be talking about Toronto versus the 90s, his new project, which launches on May 11th. We'll be right back after this brief commercial message.
You are listening to New Theory Radio.
Nothing that lives in the imagination is more frightening than the terror that lives in...
Yo, you know what it is? You know what it is? It's CT, Charlie Noir, J. IV shit. You know what it is? It's Jermaine, it's Twiz, it's Jet in this bitch. Pussy nigga can see no back. Come on in the trap to what? Stay out late, bitch. Stay out late. Nigga, it's stay out.
Never been a nigga to front. I need all my money in lumps. Niggas get dumped on for asking me to jump on classics. I spit so spastic, snap like an elastic bastard, like Gold Dirty.
And we are back here on New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk Saga 960 AM. My name is Nav Nanwa. I am your host, and this is the show where we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. And it is an absolute honor right now to welcome my next guest here on the show. He is somebody who is, I would like to say, a Mississauga mainstay. He's been in the music scene for quite a while. Definitely someone who's very well connected within the music scene, has helped out a lot of local artists. I remember first meeting this individual back at the UTM campus in 2009, I believe, at the CFRE studios. Now he is not only a host of Momentum on Vibe, which is on Vibe 105 here locally, but he's also the official DJ for the Raptors 905. And if you know Saga 960 AM, you know we are an official broadcaster of the Raptors 905. And so you probably have heard him play music in the background as our announcers are doing their thing, talking about the games. But he has a new project out called Toronto versus the 90s. And he just released a single this week called Fawad, featuring the Stay Out Late crew, another group that's NTR alums here on the show. And I'm super excited to finally have him here on New Theory Radio. It is DJ Andre 905. Andre, what's up, man?
Not much. First of all, thank you for having me on the show. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Man. Hey, this week's been a big one for you. I think anyone who's a fan of hip hop, who's very well connected to not only the city of Toronto but the GTA, I don't think there was any way to miss the track you dropped with Stay Out Late this week, especially you and I were just talking before off air about how everyone being indoors is just starving for any type of nostalgia content. And I think you guys definitely hit the nail when it came to this homage that you guys paid to the legendary Wu-Tang Clan. So congrats on a week. And how are you feeling about everything? Because it has been a crazy couple of days.
Yeah, you know what? It's been good. You know what? Like, I feel great. I feel excited, energized from just actually dropping this, and actually kind of happy because we've had this video for all. You know, we shot the video back in January, and by the time it got edited, was finally, I guess, like in March. And we've had it for almost like over a month and a half, just actually waiting and like planning to like drop it. And so yeah, like the stars aligned for us. So it's amazing.
Yeah, and again, Stay Out Late. Shout out to Scotty. Shout out to Tremaine. Shout out to Charlie. We had those three on the show a couple months back, and it was a great time. Shout out to Casino Costa, Jay Parks, Irks, and the whole entire squad. Yes. What I love about it is, number one, the black and white aesthetic of the video really took me back to Craig Mack, Flavor in Your Ear.
That's the whole idea, actually.
Oh, it is? It is?
That was kind of like the inspiration was kind of like that, and like the old Bad Boy videos, when they would have black and white, and they had like the white background, and that. So that was kind of like the inspiration for the video.
And it, even just having the entire crew in the video, I've always been a fan of a good old fashioned hip hop posse cut where everyone just has verses and they're almost trying to outdo each other, and it has that A little bit of that competitive mentality to it, but it makes it always a fun listen because there's so much diversity that's being showcased on the track. And again, I think this was a good look, man. Good look for what's currently, what we're currently facing right now. Why was it important for you to put together a project like the one that you're doing with Toronto versus the 90s?
I think a couple of things. One is like I'm a huge fan of like the old school hip hop, the 80s, 1990s hip hop. And I feel that, even though I do like the new stuff too, I feel like the old stuff kind of is forgotten. And, number one. And I think number two is I also wanted to showcase local artists from Toronto that I feel maybe don't get the same light that they, like the Drakes and the Tories and the Weekends and all get. And so I just wanted these guys to kind of get some shine and some light and just do something different that's against the norm, So that was like my whole mindset.
Especially when you think about the last couple of months, like I would say 2020 as a whole, with Drake just releasing a new album, or mixtape, whatever you want to call it, just yesterday.
Yeah.
The run that the Weeknd's currently on, Party Next Door releasing a new album, Jessie Reyes killing it. Yeah. Alessia Cara even before that. It just seems like all eyes are on Toronto and the GTA. Do you foresee more of this happening? Do you think that Toronto's run is really hitting its stride right now? And then with a project like yours, hopefully it will open some more ears to some new people. And maybe a year from now, we might be including other names with some of those lists.
Yeah. You know what? Like, I feel that there's more, that we're just, that I don't think we've even hit our peak. I think we're just finally getting it into stride, and the engine is I guess like rolling, so to speak. But I feel that there's so much more talent that's going to be coming out of the city, and I think that list is just going to even grow and grow over like the next 3-4 years.
Yeah.
So like I even think by this time next year you'll probably have some new names to add to that list.
Yeah, especially in the era that we live in now of the Six Buzz era, right?
Yeah.
Which I know premiered the video, which is huge, and Six Buzz. Hey man, I'll be honest, and I tell people, as much as Six Buzz does get knocked for a lot of its content, hey, there is the odd time where they're super informative and they do promote some either some newsworthy information or even some really good talent. I actually found out about the coronavirus through Six Buzz, so it's I'm telling you, like the way that they produce information is very applicable to the generation of now. But let's go all the way back, man. I mentioned it earlier. I met you, I believe, in 2009. I actually went to McMaster University with Dusty Loops. Shout out to Dusty Loops. He does our theme song. And Spooks or Scotty IV as he's called now. And we were all in undergrad, and I remember Dusty telling me, "Hey, we got a radio interview up at University of Toronto, Mississauga campus. It's with this guy, DJ Andre 905, and this rapper named Drega."
The Royalty Radio was like
Royalty Radio, man. I remember that. And what was sweet about that is it was not only the first time I was actually in a radio studio. So thanks for being that first for me, but it was sweet to see the show and the platform that you created back then that was really putting on local talent. And I'll always remember that because I believe that same day that Spooks was on there, you guys had Deep Pride on there.
Yes.
And I remember he had this
show.
And Pride's I think he's known by Russell now. He's gone on to do a lot since then. Yeah. But how did you become involved in the local scene? Like, what is Andre's true story? Because I feel like you've always been there. And the fact that you are, the official DJ of the Raptors 905, when I heard that, I wasn't too surprised because you've been someone that's put in work in the community and you've always been well connected. But how did this all start?
Yeah, so pretty much like it all started when I actually, like a few years even before I actually started DJing, I had this one friend that told me, "Andre, you look like a DJ." And for some reason that just like stuck in my head. I don't know why. It just like stuck in my head. And then I was like, you know what? Like I finally, maybe like 3-4 years after that, I don't know why I was slow, but I acted on that.
Yeah.
And I bought turntables and I bought vinyl. So this was still in like the era of like vinyl. And I had bought vinyl and I just started to like practice. And then from there, maybe like a couple years as I started to DJ, me and this one rapper Draga decided to, you know, we both had the idea of, you know what, let's start like our own show. And then we both went actually to UFT Mississauga. We had both graduated, and we're like, hey, why don't we just do it at that campus? It's close by to our houses. You know, we know the station, know the campus, so let's do it. And then we started Royalty Radio in like 2007. And like our whole mandate too was like we wanted to play music that you don't hear on mainstream radio, and you know we just wanted to play local artists from the city. And so it kind of like started back then, like my involvement with local artists since 2007, and then just kind of like still continuing to this day.
Yeah, and what's awesome, I think about my hip hop fandom, and what's awesome about the university stations is, to your point, they would play a lot of the stuff that wouldn't get played on the mainstream. And I still remember being a kid and listening to the UFT downtown CIUT radio station.
Of course, yeah.
And some of the like late night hip hop shows that you would hear on there.
Project Bounce, that was
Project Bounce, yeah. Shouts to DJ Ritz. Like you would get a lot of that.
Ritz, yeah.
And I remember like turning that on. That's where I would hear like Black Moon, or I would hear, you know, Mos Def or Talib Kweli, like all of these heavy New York rappers that wouldn't get major airplay on a Much Music or a BET, but you knew that there was a lot of consistent hip hop that was still being made versus what was being played in the mainstream. Trivia note, New Theory Radio, actually, when I started the show, I was on CFRE, so I was in the same studio as you guys. I believe in 2018, 2019, I had a friend there who would just take over the reins, and I had this show concept and was able to beta test it before heading over to Saga 960 AM. But again, man, I always think back to that one experience because it was legendary, man. I remember you guys allowing Spooks to freestyle. That you guys let Dusty play some beats, and it just felt like such an organic vibe. Do you feel like platforms like that still exist?
Yes, I think they do. I still think they exist. You know, I mean, I think it's just it's few and far between. I think now it's changed to like the podcast thing, right? So now you'll kind of see it with shows that kind of like We Love Hip Hop. You see it, which is just more like online based. Then you'll see it with Rich Noir on the Ones, which is dope. And then even our show, we try to do that, but we're kind of limited because we have like a 2-hour space. Yeah. And even too, it's like even when we interview people, our interviews can't really be more than really 15, 20 minutes of the whole show because we still have to play music to play and ads and such. But I still think some of those platforms are around, but I think now it's more in like podcast form.
Yeah, it's crazy how even in the span of 10 years, just how technology has sped up. And now it's a lot easier for someone to do a program like Royalty Radio or even a Project Bounce from literally their house.
Yeah,
right?
From your phone, literally with your phone.
Literally from your phone and to, you know, really connect with whoever you want, especially nowadays being in the quarantine, everyone's just connected somehow, right?
Yeah.
And again, man, I feel like you've always kind of been there. How did you end up linking up with the Raptors 905? Because that's a big one, man. That's the home team right there.
Yeah, you know what? It was just honestly just like through luck, and actually I have to shout out my homie, Lincoln Bio is his name, DJ Lincoln Bio.
Yeah,
he actually used to go by DJ Doctor. So he's the official DJ for the King of the Dot Battle Rap League. So me and him were actually good friends for years, and he used to work at Real Sports, which is owned by MLSE. Mm-hmm. So when the Raptors 905 came about, I first had friends of mine that joked with me saying, hey, you know what, you should be their DJ, 905 Raptors 905.
It just makes sense, right?
It just makes sense, right? And then I was like, yeah, so I was like searching in my head, you know, I was thinking, how am I going to reach out to them? I don't know anybody. Then I thought about it one day. I was like, oh yeah, like my good friend Ryan, Lincoln Bio works there. So I called him up, asked him, he put me in touch with like the head guy, his name is Anton, who's like the head of game operations for the Leafs and Raptors. Mm-hmm. And then pretty much I sent a bio, I sent a mix, and then they offered me like the contract for the first season. So then yeah, and then pretty much after that, I made sure to like work my tail off, and still to this day, anytime that they need me to do anything for them, help them out, I make sure to do, and yeah, and I just try to provide the best in game experience for people coming.
Yeah, I was at a game a few weeks ago with Saga 960, and again, yeah, you really kept the vibe going, and yeah, man, it's good to see that when they came to a city like Mississauga, that they really tapped into local talent versus taking someone from Toronto and forcing them in there. Because I think when you look at Mississauga as a whole, dude, the city's changed so much, and it's no longer. Sometimes it's no longer in the shadow of Toronto. It's kind of doing its own thing, right? When you think about it.
No, it's grown. Mississauga, Brampton, like the like 905 region's really grown. I mean, there's a lot of talent, not just only musically, but athletes. Like you have actors. What is it? Entrepreneurs, models. Just people coming out of the whole 905. Like someone like a Russell Peters. That I always don't forget about, and there's so much talent that comes out of here, entertainment wise and just even business wise, that we don't even think about. But I think like the shadows starting to fade away now.
Yeah, well, especially because the Raptors 905 won a chip before the Raptors won a chip, right?
Yeah.
So
that was crazy. Yeah.
even though I do miss the Raptors right now, I'm a big Raptors fan,
same every day.
I agree. Obviously, with the hat that you're rocking is like old school Raptors logo. Yeah, but it's great to see that. It's great to see the community. It's great to see them really show out for that team. One other question when it came to just the Toronto hip hop scene and just how it's evolving. I did see a tweet yesterday, and I wanted to run this by you because obviously Drake launched his new mixtape / album yesterday, and somebody had tweeted out, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Sure.
Somebody had tweeted out, "Nobody hates Drake more than Torontonians, and their reasonings are always dumb." Now, pardon the grammar in that tweet, but I think that person was onto something, because it always feels like, when you have a guy like Drake who's done a lot for the city of Toronto,
of course,
give or take the GTA, who, in my eyes, love him or hate him, you can't disrespect the fact that he's really put Toronto on the map.
Oh, of course, 100%.
He always has his naysayers, and there seems to be this interesting divide when it comes to Toronto hip hop and paying homage to history, which I want to get your thoughts on in a few moments. But as well as really respecting the people that are currently doing their thing, and not overly being jealous. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, my thing is like, for someone like Drake, I think I agree with that person 100%, because I feel his biggest hate comes primarily from people in Toronto and in the GTA, not even from places like Barrie and Whitby and stuff. It's like people in downtown Toronto, people in Scarborough, Mississauga, Brampton, that for on whatever reason they hate on him, because maybe some of those people may have been, artists themselves or have had friends, and maybe I felt that they should be in that position. Because I remember watching a interview with Little Boozy a few years back, and he said rappers that get killed are always killed in their own city for the most part, and he was like, they're killed by their own people. And I think even Nas had a quote, I think, in like one of his lines. He was like, they'll always get you. It's always your own people. Yeah. And I feel that a lot of people they'll hate on Drake, because maybe they feel he hasn't put them on or their friends on. But I think he's done so much for the city and just so much for the country globally, that you can go anywhere in the world and you say Drake, and odds are someone knows who he is, or they've heard his songs, or they're a fan. And and so I mean. I agree that people do hate on him. Sorry, I forgot the other part of your question. It's
just pretty much that. Like, because it seems as much as, and again, I've been a Toronto hip hop fan just even when I was younger, and just turning on much music and realistically not knowing the difference from a Cardinal Official music video to a Busta Rhymes music video, because it was all being played at the same time, and watching Rap City on Much Music, you would see your Canadian hip hop artists almost at an even playing field what was being put out in the US. And maybe that had to do with CRTC guidelines and just having to play Canadian content. But, for a kid like me who was 8, 9, 10, you couldn't tell me any different because if the music was bumping, the music was bumping. But I think you hit an interesting point there in regards to like people who feel they should have that spot, or people who feel that Drake didn't earn it because his journey is a lot different than what someone who maybe grew up in the core or grew up in one of our suburbs is currently going through. I kind of see that as similarly with some of the slander that Nav gets, no pun intended, not me, but the rapper Nav, who I do get confused with sometimes at Starbucks. Like Nav, like the rapper, and I'm like, I've had this name way longer than him.
Like Nav Batia,
Yeah, literally, yeah. I'd rather take that, but it's a similar type of slander, man. It's a lot of unnecessary hate. And I think people need to just look at the overall picture and the fact that there is somebody who's leading the charge for us versus, I could have done a better job.
Yeah, and it's even funny with Nav. Like, it's funny because I even knew Nav for years before he even actually started rapping. Nav the rapper, and he was making beats, and he was a talented producer. And people don't understand he paid his dues as a producer. He was producing for at least 7, 8 years before he said, okay, I'm going to start rapping. And he just happened to like get lucky.
Yeah.
But he put in his time in the industry. Maybe he didn't put in his time rapping wise compared to maybe other rappers, but he still put in his time musically. So you can't fault him, and you have to tip your like hat off to him.
Yeah, and you also can't fault people that really just take advantage of opportunity, right?
Yeah, if someone gives you opportunity, you're going to take advantage of it. If someone gives you like someone like Nab, someone gave him the ball and he ran with it. Same with Drake. End of the day, someone had to give you an opportunity. As talented as these guys are, they couldn't do it on their own. Like, even like The Weeknd had to get signed. Tory Lanez had to get signed to really get those big opportunities. Jesse Reyes had to get signed, right? So
yeah. I wanted to get your theories on something, mainly because we are New Theory Radio. Your project, Toronto versus the 90s, you mentioned earlier that the reason, or one of the impetuses in regards to why you wanted to put this together was because you wanted to make sure that 90s history wasn't lost, and that everyone who's coming up now is somewhat appreciating the people that laid the groundwork before them. So I wanted to get your theory, Andre, on the importance of history and why people should continue to pay homage to it.
Oh, yeah, because I always believe in the saying that you can't go forward without looking back. And you can't grow in your industry, whether you're in music, you're in business, you're just even, you have like a job, whatever, without knowing like the history of that, and especially with like music, I feel with like the 90s and such, like it influenced a lot of rappers even till today, and it influenced generations. So with like history, it's always good to learn and always good to like go back, and not just only musically, but with like even like the history of your country, of your roots. It's always good to like read about that and like learn about that, because the more you know about the past, the more you'll know about yourself, and the more that you can maybe learn about the future by learning about the past.
Yeah, no, exactly. Were there any artists that you had on this new project that maybe weren't familiar with the artists or the inspiration that you were trying to instill on a song, but then after they recorded with you, you noticed that they gained a greater appreciation?
No, actually, you know what? For the most part, everyone that I had reached out to that sent me records, they, like everyone had recorded on their own. But in terms of that, like, no, actually, like everyone, for like pretty much all the artists that I reached out to, I mean, most of them do have a appreciation for the 90s and the older hip hop. So yeah, I mean, I didn't get any sort of feedback that way in terms of like, oh wow, I have a newfound respect.
Yeah,
I think most of them actually appreciated that it was something different, because even a few of them, like they're trying to make music for nowadays generation, right? Which is maybe has autotune and more bumping 808s and things like that. But for them to just go back to just being raw and spitting raw lyrics,
Yeah.
I think for many of them, this is something that they could appreciate and like.
Yeah, because even when you think about the 90s hip hop, a lot of it was really around showing and proving, right? It was very much focused on lyrics, focused on how well you went with the beat. Even the beats were, some would say harder than how they are now because of just the energy that was being conveyed. Obviously, with the Fawad track with Stay Out Late, it's very much paying homage to the Wu-Tang Clan. Are there other groups or artists that you're paying homage to with the album?
Yeah, I mean, we're just paying, I guess, homage to all the talented rappers and singers from the old school, I guess, and like 90s. So like we have like the instrumental. So like my homie Roni has a freestyle over Shook Ones. Then another rapper, Snacks, has a freestyle over Lucchini, This Is What. Another rapper has a freestyle over Cream by Wu-Tang. So I mean, we're just paying homage in general to like a bunch of rappers that we're all influenced by.
That's awesome, man. No, I love it. I think it's brilliant. I think, you're obviously choosing the classics of the ones you just mentioned.
Yeah.
A couple of final things before we wrap up. Do you feel that 90s Toronto hip hop gets the respect that it deserves?
No, not at all. Not at all. I feel like just gets slept on, and unless, I feel a lot of the older people, maybe around our age, 30s and 40s and maybe like 50s and up, they understand it. But a lot of the young kids, if you ask them, any kids really under the age of 30, a lot of them don't know who Chocolate is. Some of them may know Cardinal, maybe because of Dangerous was just a recent hit. Yeah. But for the most part, they won't know who Ghetto Concept is. They unless they grew up in those areas, they don't know who Infinite is. They don't know Maestro. They don't know Julie Black, Socrates, IRS. All the talented artists that that came from that time that really helped pave the way in order to pave the way for a Drake and a Tory and a Nav. So I mean, I don't think that we give them enough homage and credit in general. But hopefully this can change that too.
Yeah, and it's. I guess one recent perspective is obviously this week before Drake released his new project, there was a lot of commemoration or a lot of conversation around Views, which had come out 4 years ago this week. And I'll always remember, I believe it was on Western Road Flows, where he name drops the Jellystone track. And
They Can Buy Me Happiness,
Yeah, and I was thinking to myself, remember when I heard that, I understood the reference because I remember that Jellystone track was all over the radio when it came out, I believe, in 2001. Mm-hmm. But to see a lot of the younger fans go back and wanting to know what the reference was about, and even seeing Jellystone in that moment getting some shine, I think that's crucial, and I like that Drake does that because I think it's important to, again, paying homage. It seems to be the conversation, the theme of our conversation. Yeah. But I think it's crucial, man, because I think people need to realize that Toronto hip hop didn't just start with Drake. Like, there was a legacy way before that. That was just as good, man. You play Old Time Killin' right now. You play Old Time Killin', I'm sure, at many parties, and it still gets the same reaction as it did in 2001.
Of course, yeah. I mean, Old Time Killing, Let's Ride by Chalk Blair.
Classic.
Classics, so I mean, even there's so much, there's so many classic records from the Toronto 90s generation, and I think it's important that that they do get their love and their homage, and it's great that Drake did shout out Jellystone on Western Road Flows, and so hopefully now I think the narrative can change where we'll pay homage to some of these guys, because the worst thing that you want to happen is, God forbid something happens and they pass away, And then we're all like, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna go through their catalog musically, and it's like, why can't you throw them their flowers when they're alive, type thing.
Exactly, man. Exactly. One final thing, Andre, you talked about the new project that you have coming out. That's Toronto versus the 90s, which drops May 11th, day after Mother's Day. Who are some local acts that you're really looking forward to or really looking to progress over the next few months or years?
Yeah, but honestly, there's so many. I know I'll probably forget some. I'll get mad at me, but for example, obviously, Stay Out Late. I think like their whole collective is, I think booming, and I think you can expect a lot more from them. There's like someone like A.R. Paisley, who I think is dope. No Joke Jigsaw. There's like, it's like Young Cake. There's like the Prime Boys. There's Roni, who I think is talented. There's 3M French. Gosh, I'm like getting a plant now. But there's there's a lot. I like, all I'd say is any artist that if you see me posting them on my story, like Young Tory.
Yeah.
I think all these guys have bright futures if they just kind of stay focused on the music and stay away from all the other nonsense.
Yeah.
Like, I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, because it is very easy to be distracted, man. And again, it's definitely the harsh reality of a lot of this is there could be some situations that happen close to home that can divert someone's attention or even totally just take away what they've worked for. And again, I think for a lot of these young talents, it's all about kind of keeping focused. And again, similar to what we had talked about earlier in the conversation, having more and more of our local artists hit the mainstream and really take over, just like how they're doing right now.
Yeah. 100%. I think a lot of these guys just actually need the chance and the opportunity. And I think once that happens, then they're gone.
Amazing, man. Andre, thanks so much for joining us here on New Theory Radio, man. Always a pleasure to chat. This was long overdue. Hey, man, this is your opportunity. Let us know how we can connect. Let us know how we can check out the new album, which is dropping next week, and how they can watch the new video that's out right now.
So definitely, first of all, I'm on social media, Instagram, Twitter, at DJ Andre 905, even Facebook as well. Beyond that, the new video, you can watch it on YouTube. The link is in my bio on my Twitter and my Instagram. If not, you can just Google DJ Andre 905 and Forward is the first video that pops up. The project will be coming out on SoundCloud and AudioMac, and I will also have links on my Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. So that's dropping May 11th. Do please check it out and hit me with feedback.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely include the link in our podcasting description as well, because I think everyone needs to see that video. It's so hype.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I'm a stickler for old school content, so seeing the homies like yourself and Stay Out Late produce something like that really had me through the moon this past week. So thanks so much. That's Andre 905, the official DJ of the Toronto Raptors. Go support him. We are going to take a quick commercial break, and then when we come back, we're going to have more New Theory Radio here on News Talk, Saga 960.
You are listening to New Theory Radio.
Dennis was a model citizen to a point where it was driving him insane. So when Scotty came back, Dennis wanted to take a vacation. I come to practice, Phil calls me and says, look, Dennis wants to tell you something. And when Dennis wants to tell me something, I know it's not something that I'll want to hear.
And we are back here on New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk Saga 960 AM. My name is Nav Nanwa. I am your host, and this is the show where we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. It is no secret that The Last Dance is really taking up everyone's current binge viewing or binge watching. And if you're like myself, someone who really misses sports, it's definitely filling that void. And what we're doing here on New Theory Radio each and every week is that we are talking about the episodes from the week that just passed when it comes to The Last Dance, as there is a lot to be learned and gained through a lot of this content that we're seeing, and as we look at the journey that Michael Jordan and the Bulls took in their very last season as they head into their 6th championship. And especially when it came to the topics of episodes 3 and 4, I thought it was only fitting to get someone who is truly a champion when it comes to Canadian basketball. They've been involved in basketball in Canada for almost 2 decades. They've done reporting for the likes of Sportsnet during the 2016 NBA All-Star Game, as well as play-by-play for the Team Canada versus Team USA games within the FIBA Americas Championship back in 2018. He's also no stranger to News Talk Saga 960 AM, as you can hear his play-by-play during the Raptors 905 broadcast here on the station, and he also does some broadcasting for the Canadian Elite Basketball League. It is our good friend Jason Thom, who is here on New Theory Radio. Jason, thanks so much for making the time.
Thanks for having me, man. It's great to make my debut.
Yeah, long overdue, and honestly, it's been we were just talking about it off air, but I feel like The Last Dance is making this quarantine a lot better for us sports fans. What do you think?
Except for the fact that they're only 45 minutes a pop. Like I do a pretty good job of, I delayed the episodes 1 and 2, so it was close enough to 3 and 4. Yeah. But then I watched 3 and 4, I think on Monday, and then I was like, oh great, now I gotta sit around and wait. I cut cable long ago. What's this? Yeah. What's this waiting around stuff? Are you gonna hit me with commercials next or what? So that's the only thing that hurts.
I actually have friends that haven't watched any of it and are waiting for all of it to come out. And I tell them, like, how could you? Like, this is like probably one of the biggest sports documentary events in a long time. And honestly, I was a big fan of the O.J. Simpson documentary that came out a few years ago that ESPN produced. And as soon as I heard that they were going to look at the 97-98 Chicago Bulls, and there was this unreleased footage that was lying around, I was just clamoring for this to come out, and I'm very happy it came out when it did.
Yeah, and the one thing I would say, everybody who's watching it to kind of keep in mind is the fact that, MJ did get, final say on everything. Yeah. Had control from front to back, which everything I know about Michael isn't surprising. Mm-hmm. But it is something to kind of, for everybody to keep in mind. I've always said over the last decade, the use of the word documentary has become looser and looser. Yeah. And this is great. I'm not saying it's not a documentary, but we have to remember that there really isn't a counter. Like, there's not even a voiceover or a narrator to counter some of the things that we're seeing. It doesn't make it any less great, but it is something to keep in mind as you watch. So as you were mentioning about companion reading and companion videos that you can see out there, it is important for us to kind of go to the next layer and see all those different things so that there is a counter message. Yeah, and I definitely did that coming out of episode 3, and we can definitely touch on it. And before we jump into the episodes, Jason, describe where were you at during the 97-98 season? You've obviously have a lot of roots in basketball here in Canada, but what's your fondest memory of this Chicago Bulls run as they approached their second three-peat? I guess the best way to describe it back then is it was at that time I could actually watch those games live, but only on certain days. And I remember Sunday nights kind of being the key one that I could watch it live. As I got older, because originally, any of the early stuff, you would only be able to watch it on tape delay. Yeah. And that, I think, immediately took me out of it. The first memory I remember about really falling in love with NBA basketball was Reggie Miller and Spike Lee.
No, yes.
And that was because for somebody who grew up in Canada where hockey was, king, the thing about basketball that got me was how close the fans could be with the players and the emotion that you could see on the player's face because there was no mask or helmet as a barrier. So that's what got me. And then to get onto the Michael Jordan level of things, that was incredibly special. The MJ at MSG, like those were the type of games that you would be able to get live. So you kind of get into that kind of folklore. But I remember saying that like when I was younger, when it was Jordan very early, MJ to me was the poster on the wall.
Oh,
like
totally.
He wasn't even a video. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, we couldn't even get highlights back then. I remember TSN, and I think it was Paul Jones who mentioned it. I remember when I was a kid that when Jordan had, was it 63 in the loss to the Celtics in the playoffs, I believe it was, and the Celtics won the game.
Yeah.
The highlight pack that night on TSN had 2 Michael Jordan plays.
Really? Even though he totally showed out.
That was just the mentality back then. Yeah, but they lost. So it's got to be more Celtics. In that 45-second highlight pack, we'll put 2 MJ plays, 4 Celtics plays, and there you go. And it's like, that was one of the best, like, I mean, nowadays, and especially because, like, my time working at the Score, I kind of, with the team there, we helped lead kind of the new wave of sports highlights. And, I mean, the way that would be done now would be 15 Michael Jordan highlights and then bringing the board up saying, oh, by the way, they lost. So it's just, I think to me, MJ shows just how far basketball has come in Canada. And the fact that now, even though we can't watch it live, which maybe we haven't come as far as we thought, the fact now that my Twitter timeline is just jammed with Last Dance and Michael Jordan type stuff, that shows how far it comes, where it was like, the initial Michael Jordan, this guy couldn't even watch it live, and now we're seeing like people talk about it for days on end. So I think that's my measurement of Michael Jordan impact on Canadian basketball is right there.
And it's I love the way you put it because when it comes to the analogy of the poster on the wall, because I'll always remember my first real introduction to basketball was just video games, like playing NBA Jam. Yeah. And I'll always remember having NBA Jam Tournament Edition for my Super Nintendo, but being upset because my cousin had it for his Sega, and he actually had Michael Jordan on his team, while I was stuck with, I think, Scottie Pippen and
Horace Grant.
Yes, Horace Grant. and I remember just being so disappointed. And I think you could unlock Michael Jordan if you just went through the entire season. But I was just like so bummed out because at that time, you had Michael Jordan, you had Wayne Gretzky, you had these larger than life sports figures that just felt like superheroes that it was just common nature to have like a Michael Jordan t-shirt on because he was on par with like a Spider-Man or a Batman. He just was somebody who had so much folklore attached to them. And, that's what I find interesting too. I watch The Last Dance every week now with my wife who grew up in India and who also just knew of Michael Jordan, like wasn't too familiar with Dennis Rodman or Scottie Pippen. And she is like enamored by the documentary each and every week because again, there wasn't a ton of focus on Jordan on TV or in sports in India, but just the stories, the character of who Michael Jordan is. Even just looking into the making of this documentary, and you mentioned it regarding how much input Michael had. And again, it really allows you to be curious to wonder, okay, well, what if we get a perspective of a Karl Malone later on about what he was going through during this time, because that would make it very intriguing. And again, I'm very happy with the way that the series has been progressing so far in regards to them really focusing on key players of this entire journey. So this week, episode 3 really focused on Dennis Rodman. Episode 4 really focused on Phil Jackson. Episode 3 to me was an interesting one. I grew up outside of being a sports fan, I'm a big pro wrestling fan. So I'll always remember Dennis Rodman showing up in WCW, Karl Malone also showing up in WCW.
Jacked.
And totally jacked. and these guys literally like showing up on wrestling television while the finals is going on. So I can't wait till they get to that. But Dennis Rodman's always been quite the character, and I feel like I never fully understood who he was when I was growing up. I think I just thought he was a weirdo based on the way he came across and just some of the pop culture elements. But I must say, man, coming out of the episode this week, I found myself having a greater appreciation for him. What was your thoughts on Dennis Rodman and how he came across?
Yeah, obviously the characters are what make this so amazing. Like, the fact that it would be an MJ look back is one thing, but the characters on this team are just amazing, with Rodman being like he went. And I love that they were able to kind of layer the fact that he was a member of that Pistons squad.
Oh, yes.
That just beat the crap out of this team.
The bad boys.
Right? And then he goes down to San Antonio, which is just like a backwards way of thinking with everything we know about the Spurs now.
Yeah. How
he would have fit in there. And it's no surprise he didn't. But that's what again, with my age, that's my first memory is Dennis Rodman with the blonde hair. And I remember Demolition Man was a big movie back then. When they dropped that on there, I was like, this was made for my life. You know what I mean? But I remember Demolition Man and the blonde hair. And I just remember him being on the Spurs and just kind of be like, this just doesn't fit.
Yeah.
And then I believe in the Spurs, and what they had mentioned is when he met Madonna. And I love the fact, I hated the fact that they just mentioned it as like a one-liner. You know, oh, and Madonna told me that I need to be myself. And it was like, oh, I'm sure there was more to that.
Oh, for
sure.
But
it is amazing that two people crossing each other at one particular time can change one person's complete life trajectory.
Totally.
And the fact, I would have loved to see them get into that more. To kind of understand, because when you look at old Dennis Rodman and where he came from, like he looked like, you know, really just kind of like a goofy kid. And then Madonna, I guess, helps him kind of realize that he can be whatever he wants.
Yeah.
And then with the money coming with that, he really can. And it's exactly what you said, like you knew Rodman as a weirdo. I mean, like I remember Rodman dressed as a woman in a wedding dress.
Yeah.
That's how I remember Dennis Rodman. And then I remember the black 91 Bulls jersey. Right? Because that was like the jersey.
That was the jersey.
And if someone wore the black 91 Rodman, you'd be like, whoa. Because like not only did he not have a Jordan jersey, he had a black Rodman jersey. So this guy was crazy. Like if you showed up to a basketball court and he was wearing 91 black Rodman jersey, he's like, you got him. I'm not guarding him. So like that's how much cachet this guy had.
Yeah.
That if somebody put his jersey on, it was like, ooh, he was scary. But you know, part of that is how amazing or how far has the NBA come and the world has come, that like he stuck out like a sore thumb back then, but now like it would be nothing. You know what I mean? Like it would not be a big deal at all. So, but from a basketball standpoint, like an absolute genius when it comes to like understand. I don't even mean a genius about, you know, this guy shoots this way, this is where the rebound's going to come off. I just mean it is in like he understood, like he purposely went out and grabbed 20 rebounds without a point.
Yeah.
Like he would do that on purpose.
Yeah.
And I just hope that kids watching this, because it's easy for kids, like in you know, I'm a commissioner of a high school basketball league, so I talk to a lot of kids at this age and trying to understand what their thought process is. And I just hope that there's kids out there that's watching this that are saying, like, it's one thing to be like, oh, I want to be like MJ. I want to be like a robot. I'm a killer. I can just beat everybody.
Yeah.
Like, look at the other guys on the team. Like, he wouldn't have been able to be that without those other guys. And there's a spot for everybody to find where they can contribute to a team, whether it be in sport or in life or at work or in your friend's circle, to be that other guy. Like, be the Dennis Rodman, be the Steve Kerr, be the John Paxson, be the Tony Kukoc.
Yeah.
Everybody needs those different parts. And Dennis Rodman played his part perfectly, but I think Phil Jackson was a huge part of that as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you put it in that way, because I find that it's very easy, especially now with basketball really being one of the drivers of just mainstream culture when it comes to just the players and the personalities and just the excitement that the games bring, that if you're someone who's not scoring points, you're considered a dud. Like if you're someone that's not willing to drive to the net and do what you can, like I'll always remember when people were, really clowning Kyle Lowry during game one of the series last year with Orlando because he scored 0 points. And people were like, oh, Kyle Lowry's an all-star. And they saw all these memes online. But again, like there's other things that he does really well. And again, I think you definitely hit a great note there in regards to just knowing your role on the team. And I think this what I've really grown to appreciate, because I've this Bulls team is already looked at as such in high regard, but you truly do appreciate as you watch this series how good of a team they actually were in regards to people knowing what they're good at, really relying on the fact that there was a process in play, which we'll get in later in regards to the triangle offense that Phil really instilled in a lot of his plays, but just people realizing that, hey, I don't have to be someone that puts down 30 points, or even, someone like a Jordan really realizing that, considering, again, they talk about it in the past few episodes. Some of the strategies just pass the ball to Michael and he'll get it done. And, it's fascinating because I'm glad they showed that context, because again, Rodman's run with the Pistons was a fascinating one, considering you have this player who was a part of a team that had the Bulls number for like 2 years, and then now he's a part of the Bulls and he's helping them win championships. It's such a fascinating movie, man.
It really is, and I think and to see Rodman's advancement, right, because he was the young kid on that Pistons squad with larger than life individuals and older guys who wouldn't allow, like, if he would have rolled into the Pistons locker room with his hair dyed blonde.
Oh God. With that bad boy mantra, no way.
Exactly. So to see the progression of him personally as well, and not only as a player, like I think that's something that I think young players can take away, and just people in general to understand, like, people always say, oh, that guy changed, he used to be this way, he used to be that. Like, everybody changes, and a lot of times it's always for the better. And you have to say that about Dennis Rodman as well, man. Like, he could have went to the Spurs, did what he did there, and then chased money somewhere else, and then fittered away and ended up like Lamar Odom, nearly killing himself, right? And I mean, Rodman still has, a lot of demons in the closet that he has to deal with. But the fact that he's still around and able to talk in this documentary, I think shows that, he was able to find people in his life that can kind of get him on the straight and narrow. And I think, that was well done that Scotty and Michael, with that Chicago squad, were able to take him in and keep him on the straight and narrow, but allow him to be himself and have a 2-day vacation in Las Vegas.
Well, that was the other part that I loved in the third episode, is they left you on that cliffhanger when he just goes off to Vegas for a vacation that he just simply asked Phil Jackson for, and then I guess Phil ran it by the team and they were like, sure. And I guess that 2-day vacation became 6 days, and then he came back as a commissioner of a high school league. If you had heard a story of a player wanting to take a vacation, do you think now, when it comes to our understanding of an athlete's mental health and just the pressure that can be put, we've seen players like Kevin Love and DeMar DeRozan really address it in the past. Do you think now there wouldn't be that type of stigma associated with an athlete that's just plain and simple asking for a break just to recharge?
Yeah, except for I'm terrified of what social media would do. Is that kind of
that's true too. Yeah,
that kind of worked its way around. But yeah, I mean, I think it was great the fact that Rodman knew himself enough that he knew that that's all he needed. And I mean, he waited till Scotty got back as well.
Yeah.
Right? So I think I liked that they were able to detail that. The fact that, Scotty wasn't there and MJ looked to Dennis and was like, you're the only other guy I got to kind of ride or die with right now.
Yeah.
And then when Scotty came back, I think it probably worked out well, because then that way Dennis allowed Scotty to work his way back in alongside MJ. And then Dennis just comes back and grabs his 20 rebounds and he's good to go. So I think it shows a lot too. And we all know that about Phil Jackson, the fact that he allows his team to police themselves. I've been involved in a lot of basketball over a lot of time, and I've seen a lot of push and pull. I've seen a lot of teams deteriorating, coaches being fired. I've seen a lot of different stuff, and to be able to weather all that, it takes a special human being. And Phil Jackson was that special human being. Like, I didn't know anything about Phil as a player.
Yeah, me neither.
But then looking back and seeing it all, like, it all made an awful lot of sense. And do I think that Rodman would have been able to do what he did without Phil Jackson as a coach? There's no way. You can give a lot of credit to MJ, but I think in the end, Phil knowing what Dennis was about and needed, and then being able to bring MJ in on that, I think Phil was really the magic piece to all of this. And his book is amazing, talking about his time with the Lakers with Kobe and Shaq, which, you know, the overall between both of those, like, there's nobody better than Phil. But it's just interesting when we talk about all the amazing things that have happened. And then Isaiah Thomas, another example of that. And then I was talking, like, just how crazy it is. Like, how bad is James Dolan, the New York Knicks organization, that he could bring in an Isaiah Thomas and a Phil Jackson at two different times, and that franchise is still in the cellar. Yeah. And those two guys couldn't even make it work in that. Do you know what I mean? Like, with all the magic that they had, it really is. It really shows just how bad that Knicks organization is, right?
Yeah. There's always that sweet Toronto spot for Isaiah Thomas, considering he was the first head office employee for the Toronto Raptors.
Yes, and I mean, he's the one that took Damon Stoudemire, right? Yeah. So, I mean, and I think he gets a free pass for that one, I think, in Toronto in a lot of ways, but you know, I would say that I was not feeling bad for the fact that Isaiah Thomas ended up looking the way he did in that. Oh, me neither, man. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, you know what, Zeke, you probably deserved a lot of that. Yeah. But with the no handshake thing, you know, you do have to remember that, you know, it was a different time back then.
Yeah, and that's what I found that very fascinating, man, because it was interesting because they contrasted it to when the Pistons had beat the Celtics, and the Celtics did something similar. And again, I think in that age of sport, there was just a whole other separate intensity that was involved, and people really took, again, people still do now, but people in those ages, I guess, if they took something to heart, they just acted on emotion, and they just, because, for example, if you were to see something like that now with, you know, a Jimmy Butler as an example, people would be all over him on social media, to your point. Like, people would be really calling him out and calling out the fact that he's being disrespectful. Like, I still remember Paul Pierce getting just completely absolutely enamored on social media, considering, you know, the treatment he would give the Toronto Raptors during the, you know, the back-to-back series that, you know, we had with the Nets and then with the Wizards, and it was just fascinating to see just how far sportsmanship has come since then. And you know, again, Isaiah Thomas did look pretty bad, and what I would say is, again, you talked about it earlier regarding how it's important to see two sides of every story. I'm very happy that TSN opted to show the 30 for 30 this week on the Bad Boys. I'd seen it a few years ago, and I decided to watch it again because, again, what else are we doing? Yeah. and I'm happy I watched it because it made you understand the dynamic of that team and just who they were and why they played it the way that they played. And it's funny, I was looking at a couple of articles, and people were saying that if the Pistons were the way that they were then, now they'd be banned from the league. Like, there'd be no way that they'd be continuing to play. But it's such a fascinating dilemma that had taken place during that 91 series, because you had Michael, who was very vocal on the way that this team was acting and the fact that he felt like they were actually ruining basketball. And then you had a team like the Pistons that were just no prisoners taken. They were just going to go and do their thing because winning was on top of their mind. And they always felt like they had this underdog mentality, even though they were winning so much, that they needed to prove to anybody that, you know, they could handle their own. And again, I almost like when you have theatrics like that in sports, because it does make it a fun viewing. But yeah, the sportsmanship aspect of it was very much showed. And I don't know, I loved how they got Michael's reaction to Isaiah's interview too.
Yeah, for sure. And again, that wouldn't happen in a normal documentary. But this isn't a normal documentary, you know what I mean? No. It's entertainment, and it was great to see all that, and you can see Michael still holds that near and dear to him.
He does, yeah.
and yeah, you wouldn't see it nowadays because the league is so intertwined. Like, players that know players. Back then, like, it didn't happen. Like Rodman could not have went from the Pistons to the Bulls. Like, he had to go Pistons, Spurs, Bulls. Yeah, exactly. There had to be a time. You know what I mean? But nowadays, Rodman could definitely go Pistons to Bulls. because you'd have some boys on the Bulls that, you know what I mean, after the game, they're dapping up and being buddy-buddy.
Well, Kevin Durant, right, went from Oklahoma to Golden State.
Yeah, that was super smooth, right? Yeah, nobody roasted him for that. But yeah, no, you're right. Like at least player to player was a different story. But if Durant got beat by 40 by OKC and then walked off the floor and didn't shake anyone's hand, he'd get killed for it, right?
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
But it really was a different time. Like when those guys say they hated each other, like they like really, people say hate's a strong word. It's like, well, back in the 80s, hate wasn't a strong word. Like, you know what I mean? Like people threw that around and they really did absolutely hate each other. And I think they still do now. Like if they showed up at a function, there was 5 bad boy Pistons on one side and 5 from the Bulls, they wouldn't come over and like chum up with each other. They wouldn't. Just wouldn't happen, right? And I did like though that Zeke threw Lambier under the bus as quickly as possible, saying he was the one who said it, knowing full well that Bill Lambier wouldn't be like, "Oh, Isaiah, why'd you say it was me?" He'd be like, "Yeah, damn right. No, I told him." I think he was on NBA Jump the next day, like saying, "Yeah, no, I didn't want to shake their hands." Screw them. Like Isaiah's like, "Oh, I feel bad now," and you know, Lambier's going, "I don't feel bad. Like I do it again." Yeah. Screw those guys. Right?
It was the same reaction he had shared in the 30 for 30 because. Because you could tell Isaiah in that 30 for 30 documentary I'm referring to came out in 2014, and Isaiah was still in that documentary kind of stuck in his ways in regards to justifying why they did it. I think fast forward now 4 to 5, 6 years, it has changed. Like he has sort of become more warm to the fact that maybe it wasn't the right thing, and we saw that in this week. But Lambier totally even took the brunt of it in the documentary and just owned up to it. So
well, Isaiah's on a bit more of like a kind of trying to shine up his PR a little bit as well. He went through an awful lot of negative stuff there, so he's kind of seeing it and he's going, listen, like Bill may be able to live on his like pension from the NBA, but Isaiah Thomas isn't gonna, like, I need somebody to pay for these 3-piece suits that I'm wearing. And he's on NBA TV and he's still trying to stay in the mix. Even though it seems like he just shoots himself in the foot time and time again. So, you know, I think in that documentary, that's why he had the big Isaiah smile on, because he was like, "Hey guys, it's still me. It's Isaiah Thomas. Don't hate me now, please." So it is pretty funny the way it all shook out for him.
So moving on to episode 4, obviously the big focus is Phil Jackson, and again, to your point, I really enjoyed the fact that they told a backstory on Phil Jackson, because again, being a fan, Phil Jackson's, you know, he's held in high regard as being one of the best coaches of all time, right? And if not the best, depending on who you are. And it was great to see where he came from. Like I wasn't too familiar with his background playing for the Knickerbockers or the Knicks. And the fact that he was considered a hippie and was very spiritual, and it was cool to have that perspective. But I think what I really took away from that episode was a couple things, but one of the big things was really understanding what the triangle offense is. And you always heard about this play in basketball and this whole theory around creating a triangle and making sure that, you know, you have options when you're on the court. And again, my interest in this went all the way into my YouTube black hole phase this week, where ESPN actually put out a video of Dennis Rodman actually breaking down a couple of instances of when the triangle offense was in play during various games during that season. We've already talked about Phil quite a bit already, but is there anything else that kind of stood out from that episode that really resonated with you?
Probably the fact that Phil really bridged the gap for coaching in the NBA from old school to new school.
Yeah.
Understanding the players feelings. Like when he talked about Rodman, he was kind of saying in that aspect, like, who is he as a person, trying to understand them as a person. You know, and there's a great shot of Phil sitting beside Dennis when they were watching some tape together. And you could just tell, like, those are two guys that could not be any more different.
Yeah.
From cultural background and all that, but, you know, found a commonality between them.
Yeah.
And I think it was beautiful to see that. And I like seeing that still nowadays with players and coaches, but he really bridged away from the old school. And again, predominantly old white males were the coaches of predominantly young black men. And it's something that basketball has had to figure out as things move along at all age levels.
Yeah.
And it's on the coaches to understand what they can do to show these young men that they understand them. All while trying to coach them and mentor them at the same time. And Phil mastered that. But when he got to LA, went through a lot of the same stuff. And even then, he was further along. So at least with the Bulls, he was still trying to make a name for himself.
Yeah.
And still try to understand himself as a coach. And then when he gets to LA, he has to do it all over again. And at this point, he feels like, well, I mean, I got rings. So, I mean, these guys have to listen to me, which I think, and again, reading his book with the Lakers, it was like that in the beginning, but then he really had to understand Kobe. He really had, and more than understanding just Kobe and just Shaq, how to make them work together. Because Scottie and MJ always worked together well.
Yeah, exactly.
So the different thing for Phil, and again, this is another thing of just lifelong learning as any human being, is, okay, I got through MJ and the greatness and everything there, and Jerry Krause. Now I'm in LA where I don't have to deal with a crazy GM. Everyone's on my side, but now I have to try to get two young men to come together. And, you know, they showed like the yoga back in Chicago, which I didn't know was a thing back then.
Me neither, man. Me neither.
Like, I knew it was big for the Lakers, but to see that at that time frame, I'm like, could you imagine if you're a reporter for that team? You're like, what the hell are these guys doing? Because they sure as hell didn't have that in Chicago at the time.
Yeah,
I mean,
yoga still had that feminine context to it, right? So
for sure, or just like drug and fueled. Like, could you imagine like an owner of the team be like, "What are you gonna have next? Like, you're gonna be doing acid with these guys?" Like, you know what I mean? Like, but Phil saw forward, and the buy-in from the players was just amazing, and I think it really showed. Again, the transition of the NBA becoming a more of a player-driven league, and understanding that you can't just walk in, have 2.5 hour practices, and every time somebody misses a layup, they have to run, sprints back and forth. There was a different way that you had to do things, and he was really the first guy to do it in the NBA and do it successfully.
Is there any coach right now in the NBA that you think shares somewhat of a similarity to Phil Jackson in regards to the way that they think about their team? Like Steve Kerr probably is a close example in my eyes, because Steve probably took a lot being under Phil's tutelage regarding how he applied, a lot of what he had learned during his time with the Bulls with Golden State. But is there anybody else that stands out that you think probably maybe has studied the Phil Jackson playbook regarding how to get the best out of a team?
Nick Nurse.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I believe ESPN has an article where, Nick spent some time with Phil in Montana.
Oh, nice.
And talking about a couple of different things. And I think he told a story about Phil kind of like testing him. And he was talking about the old Raptors. And he said, the redheaded kid, the shooter. And it was like, and he stopped and was kind of like, testing Nick to see if Nick knew about the history of this team. And Nick was like, oh yeah, Matt Bonner. And he's like, oh yeah, that's the kid. But it's like a test, you know what I mean? So, and I think Nick has a lot, but at the same time, Phil's triangle offense was less about X's and O's and more about getting a star player to buy into the team philosophy, right? It could have been any offense that you want to, and obviously, it was very political as well, because the reason Phil got that job is because of Tex Winters, right? Yeah. And being able to say, I'll do what Tex says, because that is how I'm going to get this job through Jerry. Like, that's just kind of the way it worked out. So it was politically driven, but then also understanding that if you can get Michael Jordan to buy into this, we're going to have more success. So Nick Nurse, similarly, he had to handle Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah.
So I'm sure a lot of that, he leaned on Phil a lot at that time, because there's so many similarities between a Kawhi Leonard and a Michael Jordan, that there was an opportunity there to lean on Phil to be like, what did you do with MJ that I can do here? And it was the same sort of thing, much like Rodman. Instead of Kawhi going for a vacation in Las Vegas, it was like, okay, Kawhi, like, you, through Alex McKechnie, are going to tell me when you need your vacations.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make that work.
Go load management.
Yeah, exactly. And I believe what Nick did, if I remember the story correctly, Nick had a stuffed elephant that he had in the dressing room. And anytime a player had an issue or players had issues, they would go and grab the elephant in the room. And then you knew that they had something they had to say about this elephant in the room. So that is very Phil Jackson-esque, right? And Nick, you know, it's weird because I know Nick Nurse from him being an assistant. Like, I know Nick Nurse from seeing him at the grocery store around the corner from where I live. Like, that's how I know Nick Nurse. And to see the reach to superstardom in the NBA that he has had, he still has that Nick Nurse quality about him. And a lot of that is Phil Jackson-esque, where Phil Jackson is larger than life, but Phil Jackson's also a guy you could approach and have a conversation with. Except now that he's hidden in the mountains of Montana and he doesn't want really probably to see anybody. But he is very similar in Nick in that way, very approachable. And somebody, though, that is going to challenge you if you get into a conversation with him. So I think that's really it. And I think you hit the nail on the head as well. There's coaching trees. Greg Popovich has an amazing coaching tree. Phil does as well. But Phil has it from a coaching perspective.
It's funny you mentioned that Nick Nurse shops at the grocery store beside you, because I actually bumped into Nick Nurse a few months ago at a grocery store, and it was one of the most approachable conversations I've ever had with someone of his celebrity status. Like, it was someone that I just acknowledged just while we were in the chip aisle, and I was like, "Hey, Nick Nurse, what's up?" And I remember they had just come back from their game against Brooklyn, and I think Kyle squeezed out the victory for us in that one, and he was super talkative. Like, we had a good 5-minute conversation. And I honestly, I almost felt like I was intruding, but he was cool with it. And it was such a warm interaction, and I'll always remember it. And one of the few interactions where I was glad I didn't ruin it by asking for a photo, because it just meant a lot more. Just having that moment.
Absolutely. It's funny. I wish I did more. The amount of people I talk to, but same thing, it never crosses my mind, and I think they appreciate that as well. And I think you know, the funny thing with Nick in the last time I saw him, I was looking for something, and I looked up, and he had exactly what you'd expect. He had the glasses, he had the Nick Nurse hat on, and he looked right at me, and I looked right at him, and I was like, "Hey, how are you?" You know what I mean? And it was because I've seen him so often that it was like seeing a guy who like he was a butcher.
It's like a neighbor.
Butcher. Yeah, I was like, "Oh, hey, what's going on?" You know, and he's like, "Hey," and I was like, and I walked away, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, I guess all right." You know what I mean? But it was just, I think that's why he works so well in Toronto. And again, you know, a Phil Jackson in this situation wouldn't be the same type of situation. But then back then, especially in Chicago, when you see Phil and the way he dressed and, you know, the way he kind of carried himself, he fits so well into that Chicago culture and the Chicago city at that time. And then in LA with the same sort of thing. And he also had the relationship, obviously, with Jeannie Buss, which I think, you know, made that. But then when you throw him into the New York Knicks situation, you know, it's just, I remember seeing him in those stands too. And it's just like, it's amazing to see. And I think everybody can take this out of The Last Dance, is like, culture is so important. And I'm not talking about cultural backgrounds. It's the environment and the culture that you set, either in your workplace, in your family life, in your friend situation, whatever it is. Culture is so important. And I find that, you know, with what we're doing with North Pole Hoops right now and trying to build, you know, high school basketball and build the structure of basketball in Canada. We talk about it all the time. Is culture is so important. And once you find somebody who's not fitting in or buying into that culture, you just have to say, you know, thanks, but no thanks. Like, appreciate everything you've done. Just move on. And I think basketball could teach us a lot about life in that aspect.
Oh, totally, man. And that's the one thing I do love about this series is you're getting a lot of life lessons in regards to striving for greatness, or learning how to play your position, or learning how to understand the people that you work with. Like, I think there's so much that can be applied in any walk of life that I think is, you know, makes The Last Dance such crucial viewing. Just to kind of end this on a fun note, I did like how episode 4 kind of ended with all this mystique around what's Michael going to do next season? Is he going to retire? Is he going to leave? Is he out because Phil Jackson's not coming back? very reminiscent, I would say, on the year that we had being Raptors fans and whether Kawhi was staying or leaving.
Yeah.
A part of me also thinks of the way that Michael addressed the reporters, that maybe Kawhi Leonard learned a bit from the Michael Jordan press playbook. But how are you finding a lot of these intricacies with the documentary where they're really, you have these almost like these mini storylines or almost alluding to what future episodes are going to be about? Because I just find that the way that they've been able to put this together with the footage that they have just makes it so intriguing, especially when you know the outcome when you're a fan, but still you can't help to be interested in the way that they've been able to dramatize a lot of this.
Yeah, and I mean, the camera cuts when they have them like in a huddle with reporters, and you're kind of in the news reporter kind of huddle.
Yeah.
And then the scrum is finished, and then they cut to the film camera, and then it's him breaking through all the cameras, and then it really makes you feel like you're part of the team, like you are waiting on Michael. It's like, oh, here's Michael again. He has to answer all these questions. Then he comes away, and it's like, hey, let's get out of here, Mike. Like, screw those guys. Like, it's very cool, and like, what they've been able to do with the music has been absolutely like
brilliant.
I worked in features for a long time in the last couple of years with Sportsnet. The amount of energy, time, and money it takes to get clearance for music, I appreciate ESPN, and obviously Disney helps a lot of that. But one that if you go back and watch the Rodman episode when he first came to Chicago, they use like a not so well known Beastie Boys track.
Yeah, the Maestro.
And if you go and look, and I got it off of, I think I even screenshotted it, and you go and get the lyrics for the beginning of it was like the Beastie Boys wrote that for Dennis Rodman.
So good.
And they're such huge basketball fans that it's another layer to this, that it's just like they use people who, obviously were important at that time, but using lyrics that just nailed it right on the head. And I'm sure there was a couple of times that they were like, well, this wasn't hard. You know what I mean? And then like the last episode had so much swearing in it as well.
It did, yeah.
And that Beastie Boys track, they swear not over the top in their songs, but then the fact that they could use that, I think F-bomb that they throw into there.
Yeah.
It was just so beautiful, and it's so many different ways and so many different layers there that, it is super impressive that they've been able to do that. And I think that mixed with the camera cuts that they've been able to do, I think it's a perfect way for people to understand the magic of it all. But at the same time, I am very curious with Michael getting the last say on it, how it progresses. Because for anybody who knows anything about the NBA or basketball in general, when Michael left, there was a lot more to why Michael left.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't believe that they're going to be able to get into that.
Yeah.
The rumors surrounding the death of his father.
Mm-hmm.
It will be very interesting how deep they get if they just go over it all together. And I think that will tell you the true story on how they deal with it. Because, I mean, I've had people, who tell me what really happened, and it will be interesting to see how that plays out. So, I mean, the fact that we're only 4 episodes in tells you a lot of what's to come.
Yeah, and it goes to show why it's 10 parts, because and I think there's so much that happened during that season, and it will be interesting to see, to your point, how they address the death of Michael's father, because they did win their 6th championship, I believe, on Father's Day, right? Yeah. So it's super poetic how everything worked out within that entire time frame. But yeah, I think that's the one thing that I'm going to keep a close eye on. And again, the one thing that I do love about these documentaries is it's very easy to go online and to get different perspectives, or even get a companion viewing, like we mentioned earlier with 30 for 30s. But apparently the next, episodes 5 and 6, they touch on, some of the rumors and some of the people that were leaking information regarding behind the scenes when it came to the team. They touch on the beginning of Kobe Bryant and just, him getting his start during that time, which would be really good considering obviously him passing away most recently. But yeah, like this is such a time capsule of just a lot that was going on and really pivotal for the NBA that it's truly making it remarkable, and I'm enjoying it. I know you're enjoying it. And Jason, really enjoyed this conversation, man. This was a lot of fun. You are super busy in the world of basketball, but do give us some updates. What's going on with the NPA? What's going on with the CEBL? What's going on with Raptors 905? Give us a rundown, man, because I love to get some updates.
Yeah, I mean, the CEBL is kind of right now just waiting to see if they have an opportunity to at least play some games this year, if they can put together maybe like a tournament kind of as things clear up, get like similar to what the NBA is looking at, but instead of having a season, having, the team sequestered. And I would love to be able to see that because, obviously if being involved in a broadcasting format, that would be the only way that people would be able to kind of get some basketball into them.
It's on CBC, right?
Exactly. Yeah, so I mean, it would be amazing to be able to do that. I mean, the last thing that I did, I was trying to remember back because it feels like it's been 2 years since we started all this, but the last thing I did was call a Raptors 905 game. That was the night that, Rudy Gobert tested positive, and we were just wrapping up the broadcast when we were reading this, and security was getting everybody out of the arena, and I was like, this is crazy. So, the 905, obviously, that season came to a not so happy end because I mean they were really rolling, had an opportunity to sneak into the playoffs there. Some guys were playing really well towards the end of the season. So, but the CEBL has been signing a lot of Canadian players throughout all this, obviously. So, I mean, they're in a great spot. When it comes to the National Preparatory Association, that is a high school age basketball league that goes coast to coast across Canada. So our season will start back up again in October next year in New Brunswick. But then right now, I think the other thing is like North Pole Hoops. If you don't know, if you're a basketball fan and you don't know about North Pole Hoops, we're a company. I still call it kind of a startup company, even though it's been around for 10 years. But everything that you need for basketball, if you are involved in the grassroots level, if you're a player looking to get to the next level in post-secondary, North Pole Hoops can help you with that.
Amazing.
If you're looking to get seen by scouts and be told what you need to do to get better, because that's where we lacked behind hockey. Hockey, if you're a hockey player, you're going to be able to find somebody or a group that's going to be able to help you progress along. Basketball, if you're not connected already inside of a basketball community, you really don't know how to get found, and that's really what North Pole Hoops does. So, and then interestingly enough, the combination of North Pole Hoops and the CEBL is really a perfect combination because we are across Canada. North Pole Hoops goes across Canada to find diamonds in the rough, to find young players, and the CEBL is nationwide as well in a lot of the same cities. So what we're doing right now is showing kids that you can stay in Canada at high school, post-secondary at U Sports, which is like the level of U Sports is just going through the roof right now.
That's awesome.
And then professionally. So what we're trying to say to Canadian players is we don't have to export all of our talent anymore. You can stay here in Canada, follow your basketball dreams, reach everything you wanted to reach, all while raising the level of basketball here in Canada. And that's really what our goal is, because it's kind of sad, I think we're past the time now where everybody should be playing high school in the U.S. and then you got to go NCAA to Division I and nothing else. And there is an opportunity now to make basketball in Canada stronger than ever. And North Pole Hoops is really trying to lead the charge in that.
Yeah, and I love that, man. Like I've been following the CEBL journey quite a bit. I know some people out there. In a previous life, in my brand marketing world, I was very instrumental in doing a couple of partnerships with the Toronto Raptors from a marketing standpoint, which was great. And being able to see the data in regards to the growth of basketball within Canada and how it's almost superseding hockey a little bit, because hockey is an expensive sport to buy into at an early age versus basketball, which is really just picking up a ball and just, again, joining a camp and really learning the basics. The barrier to entry is definitely a lot smaller, and I'm glad that North Pole Hoops is definitely there to help with that journey. And we'll have to have a couple of the boys on the show a little later. Maybe we'll get a couple of them to talk about episodes 7 and 8. But
absolutely, I'm going to connect you. I think you guys would get along really well.
I love it, man. I love it. And anytime that you guys need any help, give us a shout. More than happy to support. And I hope to I hope to be on the sidelines with you again at a Raptors 905 game for next season, man, because I think we can all deserve it. It's fantastic basketball. When I was out at the game I would say back in February, seeing Brazad and seeing Tyler Ennis do their thing was truly awesome. And you and Matt are continuing to do awesome work on the station. So thanks so much for all that you do, man. It's great.
Thanks, man. I appreciate the opportunity to come on. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. We are going to take a quick commercial break here on New Theory Radio, and we'll be right back on News Talk, Saga 960 AM.
You are listening to New Theory Radio. Theory Radio.
And we are back here on New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk, Saga 960 AM. My name is Nav Nanwa. I am your host, and this is the show where we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. Special shout-outs to DJ Andre 905 as well as Jason Thom for joining me on this week's edition of NTR. It was a great conversation with the both of them, and I urge you to go check out DJ Andre 905's new project, Toronto versus the 90s, as it releases on May 11th, and continue to support our good friend Jason Thom and North Pole Hoops, as they're truly making a difference when it comes to the local basketball community, not just here within the GTA, but all across Canada. So definitely go support them with that. And this, unfortunately, concludes this week's edition of NTR. Next week, we will be joined by a few guests, actually. We're actually going to be joined by my good friend Sasha Calera to break down The Last Dance episodes 5 and 6. And Sasha used to be a Raptors reporter for Sportsnet. He's worked at Vice. He just recently came out of a stint working in cannabis. I'm sure there's a lot that we could be talking about with Sasha, but at the core of it, he's a huge basketball fan, so it's going to be fun to speak about The Last Dance with him, so I'm definitely looking forward to that. We also are going to be joined by an artist by the name of Romana. Romana is a fantastic local singer. She's going to hop on the show to not only talk about her new music, but she's also doing a really cool Instagram live series over the next few weeks, and we are certainly excited to learn more about that. And it's also Mother's Day next Sunday, so please give a big shout out to your mother. And you do have a week to order her something and continue to practice social distancing, because we want to make sure we take care of our parents during this time. But who knows, I might have a mom on the show. I might try to get my wife to come on the show to talk about her journey into motherhood over the last, I would say, 6 months, which is insane because time is definitely flying. But we do have a jam-packed edition, and I can't wait to share it with all of y'all. And also, I want to just plant a little seed, but next month, we will be celebrating 1 year on News Talk Saga 960 AM. We are actually in the midst of planning our 1 year anniversary show on this platform for June 7th. Yes. Feels like January. June 7th, which is a Sunday, will be our 1 year show, our 1 year celebration of being in existence here on Saga 960 AM. And we have a lot of things currently in motion for that. So, I might just start planting some seeds over the next few weeks, just so you guys can get a sense of what we will be doing. And who knows, if we're still quarantining, maybe we'll do a Zoom party, and maybe we'll invite you all to join on the fun. All that and more in the next couple of weeks. But yes, this does conclude this week's edition of NTR. If you want to connect with us, it is at New Theory Radio across all of our platforms. If you want to connect with me, it is at Nav Nanwa on Instagram, at nnanwa on Twitter. Shoutouts to our photographer at colorblindphotography_, aka my brother Amit Nanwa. He does all of our online graphics. Go and give a follow to Saga 960 AM at Saga 960 AM across all platforms. And shoutouts to the producer of our theme song at Dusty Loops. Go give him a follow because he's always up to something. And that's a wrap for this week's edition. So thank you for tuning in, and you will hear all of us next time. Peace.